Hello, sports historians. Welcome to episode 68 of our video podcast. This is Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. The tables get turned. Well, the chairs get turned anyways. I am sitting in as the guest, and Chris Allport from our Burbank studio, Alpha Command Unit, the man himself, will be sitting in the interviewer chair, and we'll be doing a review and a preview. We hope you enjoy. I'm a Venice, California-born, Los Angeles-based sports fan, one that has played, coached, announced, and promoted sports my whole life. My love affair with sports started in my own backyard and has led me to this podcast. Thanks to the support of the Amateur Athletic Union in East Bay, I'm excited to bring you Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. What kind of equipment are you searching for?
Well, we just introduced a whole new bill to update the Alpha Command Unit's post-production division,
Nice.
so that we can accommodate a massive amount of video throughput.
Love it.
To render Ssdl very quickly.
This is different being on this side of the game.
Yeah. So that, and it's different for me being on this side of the game too.
I would imagine.
Sometimes you just got to switch the tables, and I'm really excited to be here at the 7428, which I understand
there will be a big announcement
and changes going on as we enter into this new phase of 2021. We're on the dawn of a new horizon.
We are.
Things are changing a lot, and hopefully for the better, as we try to bring the pandemic to an end so we can all get back to doing what we love. But here in the 7428, there's an incredible amount of legacy and history, trophies, memorials.
There are.
Logos, tributes. Tell me about the history that has come through the 7428 and how the 7428 came to be.
Well, it came with the place. And so I've always taken up home in garages. As a matter of fact, that was an extra attached garage was my room from the time I was 15, until I was like 20 or so. And it was where we ran the Venice Backyard Productions out of there, which of course hosted the Venice Backyard Championships. And so garages have always kind of had that mythical place for me to create from. And so when it came to coming to this house, what really just started in this garage was any and everything that had something to do with Christine and I, or the kids, Vaughn and Sienna, started to just get clipped up on the wall. And then any game, stub ticket. And then it became a place to house our trophies, either from our youth or current trophies that were coming in. We, of course, had to create a hierarchy of what trophies got to go in which places, and had a little battle on that, which was a lot of fun. And it just slowly came to be. And so over time, and when we decided to do the video podcast, it just made sense to do it out of here because it would be a controlled atmosphere, but also it was us. And also one of the guys I looked up to was Mark Maron and what he did with his WTF podcast. And he started out of the garage and he interviewed Barack Obama as a sitting president in his garage. And I interviewed the logo of the NBA, Jerry West, out of this garage. So I would like to draw some small link to one of the guys I really admire in the game.
Well, I know that you are obviously incredibly unique, and you've been really bringing this Lennon style, this Lennon family style that has found its way into multiple parts of the entertainment industry. You've brought that into sportscasting now. Yeah. And I know, from what I've read, you've started this really when you were a teenager is when the seeds of this podcast were actually planted, before podcasting was even a thing.
Sure.
Little did you know, fast forward a few decades, that you would be the voice of all of these incredible people, that you've gotten to really help them tell their story, ranging from Olympic gold medal winners to icons like Jerry West and Bob Klein, and Sam Lagana.
Sure. Well, I think it comes with the territory and being a Lennon. I never knew my grandfather, but he was a promoter. He got pulled out of the Midwest to come out and be a promotional entity for Louis B. Mayer and his productions. Thomas Ince himself pulled him out of the Midwest to come out and settle in Venice and promote movie stars and for the silence. So I think, it started there, and he certainly taught his boys how to sing. And they were the Lennon brothers who, in turn, one of them taught the Lennon sisters how to sing. So it's always being in front of a microphone was a thing. But where my particular part of that was started was when we started our Venice Backyard Championships out of my mom's backyard, which is the backyard, my garage, my back garage. And when we started there, first thing we didn't matter how many people were there, we put up the speaker and the microphone so that we could call the play-by-play, or we could point out the unique and fun things about all of the participants. So I think it just came with the territory in being a Lennon. And it reminded me of something. The very impetus, once we got this started, the first guy I went to was the president and the CEO of the Amateur Athletic Union, and his name's Roger Gowdy. And Roger and I met each other in '94 at the very first beach volleyball tournament that Gino Grajeda, Joe Tyndall, and myself put together in San Pedro, because we couldn't get a real beach, so we had to go down to San Pedro and get Carbillo Beach. But Roger came all the way out from Cleveland, and I thought that was so interesting. This guy must be really dedicated. At the time, he was just the chair of volley and the national secretary, and he would eventually rise to those other positions. But he was there at the beginning of that, and that grew into a national tour and a significant part of development of beach volleyball. But he was the one I went to say, hey, I want to get this started, and I want the support of the AAU. And he immediately jumped on board, and he became the first story I told, episode number 1.
Well, I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about Roger and his legacy, and something that I know about my family, the Allports, and the Lennon family, as well, is that we're really good about doing legacy and preserving the legacy of the people who have been before us, who have paved the way for doing what it is that we do. And from what I understand, Roger Gowdy was one of those people for you. His life, his legacy, and I know sadly we've recently lost him. How did his legacy? Well, first of all, when did you become aware of Roger Gowdy and his legacy? Was it before the Cabrillo San Pedro volleyball tournament? Did you know of him then?
No, I knew he was he was our upline guy. He was a volleyball chair, and then I was told he was also a national officer. So I didn't have a true scope of the AAU.
But
time.
Was it, so the AAU was that on your radars? Like, wow, I need to.
The AAU was part of the Olympic movement. So I controlled the Olympic movement for a long time. So I was certainly aware of what the AAU's role in American sport was.
And how long has the AAU been around?
Since 1888. And they codified sports.
Who founded it?
It was Johnny Sullivan, was really as known as the father of it, but really what it was for, it was to codify the athletic clubs that were operating primarily in the Northeast, but some in the Midwest. And so that way they'd have a set of rules that weren't regionalized, they were nationalized. And from there, it really started to plant the seeds for others to look at the rule book and the equipment, and for not just those that could afford the athletic clubs to play, but for everybody to play. And it was really an interesting dynamic how that rolled downhill. And then slowly but surely, as they went and entered more of the early Olympic Games, which would be like 1912 in 1908, I think, and that might have been hosted in the United States. So when those started to roll out, the AAU was the one who would run the trials or the tryouts, bring the athletes, and picked it up. And they remained that force until maybe even like the 50s, when a United States Olympic Committee was formed. And then it kind of changed at that point. But so I was well aware, whenever you saw that shield, that was the AAU shield. It would get taken over by the Olympic Games every once in a while, but that was the AAU shield. So I knew Roger was connected to that when he came out.
So what year did Roger step up to become president of AAU, and what are some of the marks that he left with his legacy upon the AAU?
No doubt about it. And again, you mentioned it. I just want to say, R.I.P. to my friend Roger, Dr. G, and to the family. I mean, the guy was unbelievable. He really did so much for the organization, but he did a lot. He was superintendent of 2 different school districts. He moved a lot of young people forward. Great family man. I can't say enough about what a great guy Roger Gowdy was. I think the AU was floundering really at that point. I think some of their programs were a little bit in trouble. They had some cachet, and Roger brought a lot of that back. He did an awful lot. I mean, enrollment continued to rise in volleyball, which helped the whole union rise, and he was still in charge of that. He brought the Sullivan Awards, the premier athletic amateur awards that's hosted by the AU since 1930. He brought those and put them back at the New York Athletic Club in New York. I think that was a big move into the marketplace. And, those are just a couple of things, but he also created an international element to the AAU. He also started to standardize the way sports were administrated in different parts. So that helped with enrollment. Overseeing 40 sports and 700,000 athletes and volunteers is not easy, but Roger figured out a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think he really had a way of managing everything, and that's really quite a talent. Speaking of the James E. Sullivan Awards, last year Ssdl and was the production company that was selected to produce the 90th annual James E. Sullivan Awards, and you were the host. That was a really incredible honor, and that's when you brought me in.
That's right.
And I started becoming part of the Ssdl family. I was very impressed because there was we were right in the beginning of the COVID.
Yeah.
Nobody could get together. We still can't really get together. But here we had to carry on this 90th annual tradition. So how did that come about?
Well, it really started with us just getting into production. Once Roger gave us the go ahead, said, yeah, the AAU will support you and getting started. That's what we did. And I mean, I'll just give you some of the stats. I mean, in this past, we dropped our first one, which was a Roger episode, second week of October of 2019. So we've been going at it maybe, 17, 18 months. And we've done 68 video podcasts, 76 live shows. That's what have been in response to the COVID. We were able to then really start to dive in and figure out that virtual interview. And so we created these live shows and like 28 segments, which are really anything from covering the local muralist Jonas Never to things like me being on another podcast show. That's a fair amount of work. But it was early in the live shows where Roger was a guest and a few other heavy hitters were live guests that led him to realize we weren't going to New York. Nobody was going to go there for these awards. And that two, that we were good enough to try this and put it on. And that's what we did. We went live on Facebook with it.
I want to talk a little bit about being good enough. In sports, you either make the shot or you don't. Mm-hmm. You either win the game or you don't. A lot of that applies to the production of television production and shows as well. You're either good enough to host a show and carry the show or you can't. So how did it come about that Roger felt that you have the gravitas and the ability to think on your feet quick enough to be able to host that show? Because that's not an easy task.
No, it wasn't. And I got to compliment the wife, Christine, who produced that particular show. And then Marley Reich came in to provide that assist on the other side of the production. So, I mean, it was really a team effort. And then bringing you, Jake Downey, and bad boy Bobby McCall in, we had a good team. And that made a big difference. But I think what Roger saw was we were jumping in between fun shows, whether that's, some of us, my cousins that started the VBC, to more serious shows with authors, to then kind of something in between with like a Friday night hosted show. And he saw that we were mastering somewhat the technology. Certainly there were hiccups, but there were hiccups on all kinds of things, whether it was a Tonight Show or SportsCenter. There were hiccups everywhere.
There's always a technical glitch. And what I've noticed is over the past year or so that we've been looking at what those glitches are and doing whatever we can to overcome those technical challenges, but staying focused on the content, which leads me to note on the massive volume of work that has been turned out of this little studio in the past year. There's a massive volume
there was a lot
episodes.
Of work. Well, and I think the most difficult one and the one that had the most pressure would have been the Sullivan Awards, because we were falling in line every other. We're the 90th. It goes back to 1930. It's crazy to think of that's Bobby Jones in 1930, but you could tick off some of the greatest American sports heroes ever had won that award, and we were coming in where Trevor Lawrence Heisman candidate, going to be the top draft in the pick, was nominated. And then the winners were Spencer Lee, one of the great wrestlers of all time, and Sabrina Ionescu, who was one of the great women basketball players of all time.
Yeah.
Let alone we interviewed, I think it was 10 of the what would be the finalists, and went to all of their respective spots with a quick interview with each of them and a video highlight film on each of them. And we basically went through that without a hitch. I think the only one was Sabrina, and she got back up and running. And to me, that was a minor miracle.
Obviously, you've been broadcasting on YouTube since the beginning,
Sure.
And bringing in fans through Facebook and Twitter, and having your polls on Twitter.
Sure.
But a few months ago, the High School Narrative app approached Sports Stories with Denny.
Actually, it was closer to when the Sullivans happened, because I think that's how we came on their radar. Was they noticed that we were putting out these other shows, some of the live shows, but they got wind of us through, I think, an interview I did about the Sullivan Awards or something, and he reached out to somebody, and the High School Narrative is an OTT app which allows us to distribute our material not only to their app but via their app to like Roku and to Apple TV and to a few other those OTT apps, which really got us into a whole different place, because we know most people are going to view their content on their phone. And that's where most of them are comfortable. And then from that, Chris, it led to LA 36, the cable TV that distributes to like 8-9 million homes out in Los Angeles County, to approach and say, we'd like that show on as well with some of the other content.
Okay, tell me like 3 of your favorite live shows.
I love the one where we had my cousin, Jimmy Lennon Jr., Hall of Fame ring announcer, and he was on in the same show, Chris McGee, the former AVP announcer, but now the host of the Lakers show. All right, so Chris McGee introduced...
Bucket.
But that guy, that's the guy. So Chris McGee, the East Bay champion, introduces Jimmy Lennon Jr. to the show, who in turn brought on Ray Boom Boom Mancini, world champion boxer. And it was so cool to have those 3 on the same show at one point. So that one I liked. Having Rudy Tomjanovich, who just got elected to the NBA Basketball Hall of Fame, and he had to figure out how to get on via his phone because we had some technical issues, but he never gave up.
I think those technical issues were on his end because he was not near the internet connection.
I got to say this about the guy. The guy never gave up, and he was such a polite man all the way through. Hey, man, you just get into the NBA Hall of Fame. He was such a cool guy all the way through. And then I really enjoy, because, having a history in beach volleyball, having St. John Smith and Jim Mingus on the same show. And to beach volleyball people, that's like, everybody kind of recognizes the name of St. John, but
beach.
Jim Mingus is the one who really was one of the original kings of the beach. And to have both those guys on the same show was pretty cool. So, but I can't overlook like a show like with Neil Everett, the ESPN anchor. He's hilarious. He's got so many catchphrases. That was fun. Or Mark Steinis, who, made his bones on ETV, but hosts the Rose Parade every year, and he has an athletic background as well. Finally, the ones I really got to say is like Ella Parker. She's going to be one of the great softball players in the country, and we had her on. And these are some of the preps to Olympians that we put the focus on.
Who is her?
So her uncle is Dave Roberts, the manager of the Dodgers, and Ella's going to be unbelievable. We had on Juju Watkins, and we'll be covering her more in depth with a video podcast this coming year. But Juju, state player of the year as a 9th grader, that's like ridiculous. She's going to, I think, transform that game. Somebody like Aaliyah Johnson, a track star out of Texas, who is just setting records left and right.
That's more than 3.
So that's a lot. I know I get excited about those shows because it's really fun to have them on our show.
So last season, we had a couple of formats. So we had the live shows, and then we had the video podcast. What are some of your 3 favorite video podcasts?
I'm going to go with my Final 4.
Okay.
Final 4. And this isn't easy because we've had some good ones. But Norm Bass, okay, interviewed him over at the coffee company right near LAX, and that's his favorite place. Norm was the first Black American to play pro baseball and pro football. He eventually got eliminated from sport for those reasons because of rheumatoid arthritis, undiagnosed. And he was bitter about leaving sports at 25, 26 years old when he's that great of an athlete. He eventually found his way back to some kind of redemption with his life through table tennis that he picked up later in life. And by the age of 60, Norm won the bronze medal as a Paralympic athlete at the Sydney Games. Now those are all great athletic achievements, but the guy is even funnier than he was great as an athlete. I would compare him to Muhammad Ali in the way he woofed it up and bragged about himself, and Red Fox as far as his biting humor. Like, he was so much fun and he had such a unique part. So Norm, really a favorite. Karch Karai, who, I mean, coming up, Karch Karai identified himself as a great athlete and not just a great volleyball player. And for men playing volleyball, that was a little bit different. It wasn't always thought upon as a men's sport. It was thought upon more as a women's sport. But when he came in second place, should have won first at the Superstars competition, you knew what great athlete he was. And Karch, winning 2 indoor gold medals and 1 beach medal, and the most pro beach tournaments ever, cemented his name as the greatest volleyball player ever. And he now is the Olympic women's coach. I mean, unbelievable. I loved getting that one. Really got us a lot of traction. The others would be, when I was a little kid and I was in my backyard, I would throw the football up in the air and I'd dive and catch it, and I'll call out Bob Klein, because Bob Klein was the tight end for the Rams, and I just knew he was just holding that spot till I got to the Rams, and then I would take over for him. And having that boyhood hero of mine come on the show, learning so much about his years at USC, being a national champion, blocking for OJ, catching touchdowns on those Rose Bowl teams, that was insane. And we interviewed him over at Casablanca restaurant, which was shot. And this is, you and Bad Boy and Allport Productions just put on a cinematic show with that one. And then the last one was the most recent one, which you came over here and set up in this garage, the same garage that hosted the 90th AAU Sullivan Awards, at Jerry West. Come on now. Jerry West, the logo of the NBA. I mean, yeah, incredible. You could argue he's the greatest Laker of them all. You could say, being a state champion in high school, runner-up in college, NCAAs, a gold medal, followed by, eventually leading the Lakers to that NBA title.
Both he and Bob Klein, I mean, they were just such gentlemen and so humble. And what was exciting to me is that we were just having a conversation, with them. And it was very down to earth with both of them.
Every once in a while, sitting where you are and Jerry West was sitting where I am, I would just look up and I'd be like, that's Jerry effing West. Jeez, I mean, the guy is like so legendary.
So SSDL is really generating this massive empire, or at least a cult following.
Sure.
I mean, I went to CVS the other day, by the airport, and I parked in the lot, and there's like an SSDL sticker that's like on, that somebody had like, put on the post, the light post. That's pretty cool. So, but in addition to the cult following, even standard media is picking up what Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is doing. I know that the work of SSDL was recognized by newspapers like the Pali Post, who published works, the works that you had done on Sam Lagana, Bob Klein, and Jerry West. So tell me a bit about the Pali Post.
Well, it was pretty cool because they first picked us up when we interviewed Sam Lagana, and he's a longtime Palisades family that has been there. And Sam Lagana, the voice of the Rams at SoFi Stadium and various other things, has and they took the transcript and put it in there, and I said, please. And it was great to get that. And so they followed up with Bob Klein, who also lives in the Palisades, and it so happened that Jerry West had a place in the Palisades. So all of them connected, but what was great was just to see in the kind of media that I grew up on, reading a newspaper, being recognized with this new kind of media. And you know what? When you mentioned that cult following, I would say, yeah, well, my family's big enough to form a cult, so that's good. And the other thing is, if I didn't have my best friend Ray Castro performing as the box cobbler, who knows if we would ever got anything off the ground.
And I just got to ask, this box cobbler bit is pretty damn funny. And my favorite one is that you're watching the Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. So I pray for each and every one. He does this thing where he's like this fat little Pope character. Well, okay, where did the box cobbler come from? Like, where did you find this guy?
Yeah, that's a lot of people ask that. But I grew up with them. I knew him since second grade.
I'm sorry.
So I wore that. I took that bullet. And so it was a natural because he's such a character.
Is it okay if we make fun of him a little bit here, roast him a little?
That's important.
Okay.
One of the things about podcasting that is interesting and drew me to it was that you can interject what is important to you. You don't have to homogenize it like you would for a mainstream media channel. And it can be unique. It can be what it is. And so family has been central to this. So my daughter, Sienna, has constantly shot photography behind the scenes. Marley, she and I have been in this from the start, of course. And Marley I've known since she was 5 years old. She might as well be family. She might as well be my daughter, but her dad might not give her up that easy. And then my wife,
I don't know.
Christine,
I heard something different.
he might put her on.
He had too many girls.
I
so.
could maybe trade some. I could trade my son. And then, Christine, my wife, immediately figured out all the technology and how to do the live shows right away. And she and I, when the COVID first hit and Marley unavailable to come over, she was easily picked up as a producer. So it's been a family thing, right? And that lend itself to Ray coming in. That lend itself to me reconnecting with a kid I used to coach in school who now runs Casablanca restaurant, which led to his daughter, Alexandria, being somebody who would interview authors on our show. And all of that unique to the life that I built, Venice and St. Mark and beyond in that community, it just made sense. And I like that side of it. And that's where Ray fits in, because I had to give him a spot or else I'd have been media.
And now also, I've heard that we've been nominated for a Dossier Award.
We have, which is fun. And it was for a 2020 Best Video Podcast Series, a CIC Docent Award. Because the Jerry West 4-parter was split at the end of 20 and beginning of 21, they considered it a 20, and it was one of their last nominated video podcast series. So that is great. We know there's some other great ones up there, and we'll be happy. But in the meantime, we're also taking that same series and getting it out for your consideration to other outlets for other awards, because we feel it's really strong. And we're fortunate to shoot off of your special effects screen out of the Burbank ACU Alpha Command Unit studio. And I think we really were able to put something together that, it was nice to be recognized by the docents.
So, what's next for SSDL? Is it Kareem? Is it Jeannie Buss? What's on the horizon for our second season?
So there's a couple things that are next. First, like I mentioned, Coach Wood and the great UCLA coach. I just want to say, he talked about something. He was like, not all change is progress, but progress requires change. And I've always felt that. And so we always want to be on the cusp. But now, that said, I first want to recognize a member of the family that we also lost recently, and that was Buck Magic Lennon, our faithful golden retriever, who, if I'm not mistaken, I think was 12 years old at his death. And he was on his last legs with a tumor, but he was always sitting right here in the studio. And we have him, of course, kicking it out after a triumphant movement in the backyard, and Kick It Out Buck became our sign-off. And so we loved us some Kick It Out Buck. And that said, what we're going to do is we're going to name this the Kick It Out Buck Studio. So we'll probably go by the Buck Studio now moving forward. And Marley came up with a good tagline, where magic happens, because we in fact named him Magic Buck Lennon after Magic Johnson of the Lakers, who his coach Pat Riley used to call Buck to get him to play even tougher. And so anyhow, we're sad that the Buck, and for Christmas, look, my daughter got me that. And this is Buck right here. How could you not? Look, he's a member of the family. And we're going to miss the Buckster. But that said, we'll remember him, because Kick It Out Buck will always remain at the end of all our productions. And we'll rename this the Buck Studios now.
Such a great guy. I mean, he was always right here next to us.
Always.
And just had to be part of the action.
A little bit of contact.
Yeah.
But that said, part of this progress is moving us into the Burbank Alpha Command Unit studio. Like, that's awesome resource. So as we go to shoot our live shows, which we'll also tweak, some of them very well could be shot out of here, the Buck Studio, but some of them could be shot in Burbank as well, which will be great. And we're going to try, as you talk about what it is moving forward, I can anticipate some of the guests. I know who some are going to be that we've already bagged. But what I think the live shows, what was our Prep to Olympians show, will remain intact. Whether that's the name or not moving forward, we'll see. But we're going to shoot it a little tighter with better production. And I think that's going to be important. We're still going to have our host of correspondents. Alexander's not going anywhere. Box Cobbler still be part of the process. And then we're also going to have people like, I'm reaching out to aspiring broadcaster, podcaster on the East Coast named Brandon. Some of them already know him from our show. He's going to give us some updates of what's going on in North Carolina. We're also going to have an author who's written some great books who's going to jump in, and a comedian who's going to jump in. And all of those combined, I think we're going to tighten up. We're going to have segments, and it's going to be a slicker show that'll give us an opportunity to market it beyond YouTube, beyond LA 36. That'll be our live shows. And our video podcast, yeah, I'm after Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'd love it. I'd love to sit down with Jeannie Buss. I think she's dynamic, and it'll be a great time sit down with her. But what we do know, we already done an interview with Juju Watkins, the Sports Illustrated Kid of the Year for 2020, and we'll be releasing that soon enough. And we're looking to do a story on St. Bernard High School, which I went to, but it was at the top, bottom, and it's risen again. And that's a great story for how sports can help move a school forward. I'm looking forward to that one. You know, we have some other ones we're sitting on that I think we can push out that'll be strong too.
So I know that in the vault, SSDL has a lot of incredible footage that we haven't seen yet.
That's right.
Some of which we have seen, but we might go into more detail.
Right.
Others that hasn't been seen at all. Tell me about some of the existing footage that we're going to get into in this coming season.
We have one of the things we explored in very short 11 episodes was in regards to that Venice Backyard Championship, what I talked about. I have a lot more footage than was shown on those 11 episodes I did with my cousins, which tended to get off the rails a little bit and some fun jocularity. But that said, we have some pretty cool footage where I think a really great story can be told of the meeting of the sport of volleyball, of the city of Venice, of the 80s, and how all of that played out into this legendary event, right? So I'm sitting on a lot of archives there, sitting on other archives that have to do with the other places I've been in, whether that's women's pro beach volleyball, administrating high school, elementary schools. Yeah, they're there.
How do you see our live shows being different in the new season?
Yeah, right. So I think the way the live shows are going to be a little bit different is we're going to have a guest, certainly, but we're going to lean more on correspondents and contributors in a quicker fashion that I think is going to make for a wider palette of fun.
A snappier
show. That
we got a really big
necessarily
show for you tonight.
The video podcast. So I always kind of said, like, the video podcast is kind of like 60 Minutes, and I want the live shows to be much closer to like a Tonight Show. I used to love the Johnny Carson show way back when, and I want that. I want a panel. I want a few different contributors, because Johnny was at his best when his guest was making Johnny crack up.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm looking for.
One thing before I get into our sort of dessert questions, what about civil rights? Jerry West was always a friend of the civil rights movement. How can SSDL also be a friend to the civil rights movement?
Well, I think just through telling, like you mentioned with Jerry West, just telling his story is going to be. Look at what Brendan Ayambandejo telling his story. Terry Gilliam telling his story. Those people, their stories are the stories of what people are doing in civil rights. I know one place where we want to improve. For instance, on our live shows, we've done a really good job of showing young female athletes that are achieving at a high level, as we have with young boy athletes. What we're going to do is tell more interesting and uplifting stories about female athletes that either were or are now at the professional Olympic ranks. And I think that also can serve as an example for what young women can look to be. So that's an area that we're going to get better at, is with that. I think there's some unbelievable stories out there. I think the fact that we've interviewed a guy like Jerry West or somebody gives you a little cachet to hopefully get a Billie Jean King. Somebody like that, I think that's our role.
And we've always got Alexandria.
Got Alexandria. We got to play that card. We'll play that card.
She's a quick character. I mean, what is she, 10, 11 years old? 10. She's interviewing these authors. I mean, that's pretty cool.
She can do it. Yes.
She's funny.
She can do it.
Okay, dessert. Favorite logo?
In all the sport?
Mm-hmm.
Interlocking LA.
Favorite food?
My wife's lasagna.
I guess we've already covered favorite guest, really. But just, I don't know, favorite guest, one.
Well, I'll go with Norm Bass.
Favorite SSDL employee?
Ooh. Let's see. Man, that is a rough one.
Ooh,
Considering everybody is considering that everybody is working for the same rate, thus nobody's considered an employee, I'll go with Buck.
Now that is a fantastic politically correct response. Okay, final question. Favorite SSDL fan?
Oh, well, he's going to become part of our group. Wow. This is hard to overlook my brother Bobby, because my brother Bobby has been there from the start. Matter of fact, when we very first started, his wife shot me a picture and it showed him just sitting out and he's just enjoying a cigar and he's watching on his computer. And I'm like, he's 18 years older than I am. And I missed him. He was in Vietnam when I was really a formative part of me growing up. And I was like so proud that he did that. So brother Bobby's way up there. But Brandon's coming on strong out of North Carolina. I love me some Brandon. And when he asked me how's the empiring going, or how do you build this empire, I thought, I like your language. I want to bring you on board because that empiring is what we're trying to do.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Oh, no questions, no comments, no concerns.
Right, Jeannie West Driver. She comments on everything.
She did. Jeannie West Driver's been there from the start.
Thank you, Denny. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
I think it takes a lot of chutzpah to turn it around and be the guest. So I would like to compliment myself on my self-confidence in being the guest.
Incredible. Thanks, guys. All right, we're out.
Woo!
Hey everyone, make sure you guys are following us on all of our audio platforms, YouTube, subscribe, leave some comments. It'll really help us grow the show, and we hope to bring you way more content in this upcoming 2021. Thanks for watching and listening. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is produced by Christine Jinvo and me, Marley Rice. Directed by Chris M. Allport with studio support from Alpha Command Unit and shot by bad boy Bobby McCall.
Original music, courtesy of Lennon Music Production, and original images, courtesy of Sienna Lennon Photography. A big thank you to all of our contributors. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is a production of Sports Stories, Inc. You can find us on audio platforms everywhere and the High School Narrative iOS app. You can also view Denny's shows on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.
Make sure to press that subscribe button, give us a review, leave a comment. It will really help us grow the show.
Hey, you know what else would help us grow the show? Hustle on over to patreon.com/Denny Lennon to get some never-before-seen videos, pictures, interviews, and more.
We are all over social media and constantly sending out clips on Facebook, conducting fun polls on Twitter, going live on Instagram, and more.
To find all our social media links, hustle on over to sportstoriesdl.com.
SSDL proudly supports the My Stuff Bags Foundation and the Heroes Movement.
The My Stuffed Bags Foundation, with the help of thousands of people across the country, provides children in unfortunate situations with new belongings and new hope through its innovative My Stuffed Bags program. Heroes Movement is a nonprofit that bridges the gap from therapy to getting strong again through small group workouts for any veteran of the United States Armed Forces for free. Links to how you can support and help these foundations can be found on our website. We want to give a big thank you to our partners of the show.
So, as Coach Lennon would say, any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me, Marley, at info@sportsstoriespodcast.com.
Sports Stories thanks all of our followers and listeners. And we will see you next time. Hey, thanks, Marley.
Thanks, Chris.
We like to see Sports Stories on a Thursday night with Denny Lennon. God bless everyone.
Kick it out, Buck.